When we talk about cash in accounting, we are usually thinking about the money that's in our checking account. And we're not talking about just cash, dollar bills, $100 bills. We're talking about the asset account cash that includes our checking account. We also could have an account if we have some savings. And then we're going to have what's called a petty cash account, which will open in this chapter. So all of that is going to be usually what we have in the bank. If we have a cash register and we have a beginning cash in that register, we'll probably have an account to show what we have in those cash register drawers. If we have 50 cash register drawers and we keep $100 in each one of those, we need to show that someplace on our balance sheet because that's going to also be included in our asset cash. It's not cash that's readily available for us to spend because it's tied up in the cash register drawer, but it's still going to be included as cash. Does anybody in here manage the petty cash at their work?
I work in cash control at Six Flags.
So do you all have a petty cash account?
Like I just work with the cash registers. And
Okay. Okay. And does anybody else work with handling cash? Because when we talk about cash, it's not traceable, is it? If I found a $20 bill up there at the front of the room, and I said, oh, somebody lost a 20, whose is it? Every single one of you could say, it's mine. Because there's no way to identify that $20 bill. When we have a check and we have endorsed that check, it's just like cash. We have turned over the ownership to that check once we endorse it. It's always best to endorse once you get to the bank or use a restricted endorsement if you're making a deposit. But cash is very, very hard to track. We see a lot of people in prisons for white-collar crime, and white-collar crime usually involves cash because you can't track it. Some of you might be the owner of a business sometime in the future. You need to know a little bit about accounting so that you know if somebody is embezzling money from you. That's one of your responsibilities as the owner of the business. Do we have to know how to take care of or to manage the books? Do we need to know Peachtree or QuickBooks if we're the owner? Maybe not. I mean, you might not have to, but it might be a good idea to know what's going on because there are some very, very shrewd people out there that are handling cash in businesses that can write themselves a check. That could just be in the bank deposit, that just could be slipping out the cash from the deposit and just recording the checks. And I know my father-in-law owned a gas station several years ago. Didn't do a very good job of reconciling his bank statement, but always did a deposit every day. And in a gas station, you have lots of cash, lots of credit cards, lots of checks back then when he had that. I don't know that people even accept checks at the gas stations anymore. So he always worked up his deposit. And one of the people at the bank was a person who went to high school with me, just went to work for the bank right out of high school and moved up fairly high in the bank. But she and another coworker were taking the cash out of his deposit. Took him a while to find out when he thought he had money in his account and he really didn't. Took him a while to figure out what was happening, and it would take two people at the bank to be crooked to take money out of a deposit because the night deposit is opened by two people. My sister is a principal at an elementary school, and she has a big PTA group. And you know how they do the book sales? And they sell the books, and that's one of the fundraisers for the PTA. Well, she thought she had money in her PTA account according to her records, but when she got ready to write some checks out of that PTA account, it was short. Her PTA treasurer was not depositing the cash. Depositing checks, but not the cash. Can you track that? They figured out who was doing it and where the cash was going, but is there any record, unless you had written a receipt, that someone had paid for their books with cash? There's not. A good friend of mine, who actually married my brother, was in Camp Cupcake in Alderson Prison for women for embezzling from a doctor's office that she worked for. Spent 6 years there, writing a check to herself every month. She took in the cash receipts, she took in the accounts receivable, and she also was in charge of reconciling the bank statement and writing the accounts payable checks. How easy was that to write herself a check? My brother says he doesn't even know what she did with the money. She's out of jail now, prison, and it's the same place where Martha Stewart went. So it is just too tempting, I think, for some people to be in charge of cash. You'll usually get caught. But as the owner of a business, you need to be very shrewd about who's handling your cash. You need to have dual control. I'm a member of a professional organization, and I'm the president for the next 2 years. And we just moved our money to a bank that has branches all over the state of Texas, instead of a small bank in Lubbock where our old treasurer was. Trying to get on that account has been a real pain. I'm still not on the signature card. I'm on the account, but I'm not on the signature card. I'll probably never write checks on that account. The treasurer will, but we need to have more than one person in charge of that money. So we've decided that the president and the treasurer and the old treasurer, which that's sometimes not good, to have them on the account too, so they can still write checks. I'll probably only make deposits because I'm in charge of membership. But you have to have dual control of things. My husband says it should take 2 people to sign your check in that organization. But the other person lives in Jacksonville, Texas, and I'm here. I don't know how we would both sign the check. If we lived in the same town, we probably could. Most big businesses have 2 people that have to sign the check. My husband signs the checks at Steves & Sons, but someone in the accounting office has to sign the check also. So 2 people are checking the amount of that check, who it's going to, with the invoice. 2 people are looking at it. When you have your own business, make sure that you have dual control over the cash, because you cannot trace it. And it's just too tempting for some people. A long time ago, I worked at a bank in Virginia, and one of our tellers came to work with a brand new car. And back then, and it was a very expensive brand new car, and her cash register or her teller drawer had been short several times for large amounts of money. Don't give it away. There are signs that maybe things aren't on the up and up. Right? Be very shrewd when it comes to cash.
Also, something that colleges get hit for a lot is invoice fraud, which is why you need 2 people signing the checks as well, because somebody just passes an invoice into the accounting department, their buddy signs it for them, and all of a sudden $10,000 are out, and that looks legit.
And it's not just in a school, it's anywhere. To try to get a check written at Alamo colleges is very difficult, even when it's a reimbursement for your travel. If something is wrong with that, when you turn it in, it just gets kicked out. They don't call you to say, hey Cheryl, what you turned in for your travel is incorrect. You just don't get your check. And then when you start doing research, oh, it got kicked back several weeks ago. They don't tell you. I know. They don't tell you that. So it's not just at schools. It can be anywhere. You just have to be very, very shrewd when it comes to controlling cash. I'm in charge of the petty cash, or the sunshine fund that we call it here. And all of the teachers in our department pay $25 a year. That helps us do if we have flowers that we need to send, if someone dies, or if someone is sick. I have get well cards. We also do a birthday party every month. And somehow I'm the one who got elected to doing that. I keep very accurate records, and I make sure that it balances every time I take money out of that. This year, my daughter, who works at Broadway Bank, said, let me just put that on a debit card. I can get it for $2 in the bank. So I don't have any cash anymore. It's all on that little debit card that I guess it's really a credit card. It's just a one-time use. I can't add any more money to it. But I took all of our money, put it on that card, and then I don't have to worry if someone, ever got in my purse or something and took that cash out of my purse. Because I always carried that cash with me. I didn't want to leave it here. And with $25 for every teacher in this department, that's a lot of money. So now I just have the card. So we're going to talk about petty cash, and you need to have a little bit of cash in your office. If I needed for someone to run to the store and get us a new printer cartridge, which we couldn't do here, but let's say we were in a real place of business and we ran out of ink and I needed for Juan to go and buy some, I wouldn't just ask him to pay for that himself. I could give him money out of the petty cash. He would sign it out, and then when he had the change, he would bring it back to me with the receipt for whatever we bought at the store. So we need to have a little bit of cash so that we're not imposing on our employees. But how do you find someone that's trustworthy to take care of that cash? And you can't be the person that does everything. You have to be able to delegate. I don't know that you want 2 people in charge of your petty cash, but you certainly need 2 people in charge of balancing your checkbook and then doing your accounts payable. You don't want that person to be the same as my sister-in-law. Was a small business. She did everything. How easy to just write yourself a check. And she did several times. All right, so controlling cash. We're going to look at making deposits. We're going to look at writing checks, how we endorse those checks to make the deposit, reconciling a bank statement. How many of you reconcile your bank statement? No, and you should. You should. That's one of your responsibilities. I had a job years ago where I was the overdraft clerk at this bank, and we had about 5 branches. If somebody had trouble with their overdrafts, they could bring their bank statements in, and some people never reconcile that bank statement. So they had years worth of statements that had never been opened and trying to reconcile their bank statement. You've got to try to find one place where you were kind of in agreement and then go from there to try to reconcile that bank statement. But banks make mistakes. You can make a mistake. The teller can make a mistake on that check as they're coding it in for your deposit. When it's running through the proof, it could have a mistake. So make sure that you do reconcile those bank statements. The petty cash, we're going to talk about that, and using the auxiliary petty cash record, how we replenish that change fund, which is what we'll have in the cash register drawer. And then what do we do if we're short or over? Some businesses, you can be short and over. Sometimes it comes out of your check, and after you have so many times, some people are let go. All All right, Isaac, you said you were involved with the cash register drawer. How do they handle if you're short?
Like basically, we just send it over to loss prevention who deals with it. But I know if like if you're like over by too much money too many times, you're let go.
You could be let go. Yes. And short, same thing.
Yeah.
Being over is just as bad as being short. You know, I've been a teller before, and sometimes you're just off a very small amount, and everybody's in a hurry to get out of there, and I've had the cashier say, just take the 10 cents out. So I take the dime out, and guess what? Then the next day I'd be short a dime instead of over a dime. You just need to record it, because then you have to record again, or you have to put that dime back in. Something I added incorrectly, I just counted my change incorrectly. Now, if you're over or short by thousands of dollars in the bank, sometimes you have to go and count the money in the vault. If you bought money from the vault and didn't record that correctly, or if you bought money from someone else, that could be why you're out. I know and you can lose your job over that. There's a story of a local bank here in San Antonio, and whenever the board of directors met, the board of directors were given an envelope with 10 $100 bills in there every time they met. And two tellers were trading money or buying money from each other because the one that was responsible for the envelopes didn't have enough 100s. So bought some 100s from one of the other tellers. Just put those in the envelope, and they I don't know how they had the money strapped, because usually you have more than just 10 strapped. I can't remember the 100s, how we strapped those. But she just put the money in the envelope, sealed it up, put the person's name on it. When the board of directors met and they opened up their envelopes, there was a 100 on the front and a 100 on the back, and the others were ones. They both lost their job. Now, the person that was putting them in the envelopes just didn't check when she bought the money from the other teller. But the other teller was taking those other 100s out and substituting with the one. You have to. I know. How stupid is that? I don't know. Or do you think I can just do that? I can borrow that money for a while and then put it back? I don't know. I don't know what the thought process is to think that you wouldn't get off. But they both were out of a job. The internal control is what you have to make sure that you have. If you're the owner, or if you see something happening in your workplace, if somebody works out of your cash drawer, that is a no-no. They should not be working out of your drawer. That just should be your work, because there's no way to check what that person did when they were in your cash drawer. Need to protect all cash receipts and control the cash payment. So that's our accounts receivable, cash that's coming in, and then the accounts payable when we're writing the checks, making those payments. Responsibilities and duties of employees have to be divided. All cash receipts should be taken on a daily basis. My father-in-law thought he was, but he wasn't doing part of his job, and that was to reconcile the bank statement. Had he been doing that, maybe he would have realized that that cash was not being deposited because it didn't match what he had in his record. All cash payments should be made by check unless we have that petty cash account and we have actual cash. Rotate your employees. At banks, you have to be off for a total of so many days in a row to see if anything turns up, like the ones in with the 100 strap, if the vault is not balancing. So there's so many days in a row that you have to be off when you take your vacation at a bank. Anybody work at a bank now? Things have changed in the banking industry so much. I haven't worked at a bank since the 70s, so I know there's lots of things that have changed. But my daughter tells me some things about the bank. Yesterday, she opened up a checking account for someone for $1 million. A personal account. And they have a quota at the bank. Did you know that? The tellers have a quota. How many loans they process, how much money they bring in, how many new accounts they open, how many new households they have. Yes, so that's a lot of money. Tellers, they do. Referrals. They don't actually process the loan application, but they get the referral. They all do. If you don't have quotas for your employees, and I have a friend who now works at Dillard's and she works in the jewelry department, they have a quota every day of their sales. And if they have a return, that goes against their quota. I didn't know that. Did you know that? And if you're in the shoe department, you get an extra commission check. I want to find out where that commission check comes from. I think it comes from the shoe manufacturer. It would have to come from them, because who else would give them a bonus in the shoe department? I think they have brand names, and it's the brand that gives them the check. Does anybody know that for sure? Andrew, do you know that?
With other manufacturers, that tends to be the case. I don't know about the shoes in particular, but certain, even like Hershey's will do this. Like, you know, they'll kick the cashier like 90%. Like they run a promotional lights program where it's like, okay, X person has sold Y number of this product. We, send. In this case, it would be sent Dillard's a check that would get passed on
To that person, okay. Excuse me. That's the only way I could think of why the person in the shoe department would make more money. So if you're selling Kohan shoes, and that's a Dillard's brand, and you have so many of those shoes, then you would get a bonus check. An incentive. But I didn't know you had a quota in the jewelry department. Then you have to make it up the next day. And it's a daily quota. And I think sometimes when you go into a store, you can tell the ones that are working that have a quota or a commission because they're all over you. Aren't they? You know, just tell me you're here to help me if I need some help, but let me do my looking, you know, and then if you've made a first good impression with me, then I'll find you when I'm ready to check out. And I usually do. My sister and I were shopping in Chico's when she was here visiting, and this older lady greeted us at the door and just gave us her name, and she said, when you're ready to check out, I'll be glad to help you. Wasn't very pushy, just greeted us. And when we were carrying, my sister is a big shopper. I am not a big shopper. We had armloads of stuff. And this other lady came up and said, I'll just take you stuff to the register for you. Well, she thought that was going to be her sale. Well, I tracked down that other lady and greeted us at the door. Because I know she probably had a quota. Maybe not a commission, but she had to have so much in sales per day. And you can tell. Good customer service, or does that just drive you crazy? And then some stores you go to and you can't find anybody to help you at all. Right? I know.
It's like the store has.
Oh, I know.
There's a reason why Circuit City's gone.
Yeah.
That's it right there.
I know people talking on the phone while they're checking me out. I have said, I'll wait until you're finished. When I was so sick, I went to the Minute Clinic at CVS. The lady was very nice, but she answered 3 phone calls while I was in there. And when I had to do my evaluation at the end, because they sent you an email just to evaluate their service, I said, don't answer the phone when I'm in there. That's just annoying. But not very many businesses do that. I'm back. I always bring my phone out. I give you all my cell phone number, so if you're late or you can't come to class, I've asked you to communicate with me. So I always try to check it. It's sitting up there. but I haven't checked it since class started. I know it's just rude when you have a customer that's face to face. Why am I less important than the person sitting at home in their pajamas calling you? And that's how I feel sometimes, right? So we'll have good customer service. By the way, on April the 1st, I have a guest speaker coming to my Applied Accounting Topics class at night. He's coming at 6:30. He owns an accounting placement company here in San Antonio. And he said, invite your other classes. He said, I place chief executive officers. I place clerical people that they're looking for people that have accounting skills. Because I said some of my students are taking my intro class with the administrative assistant, and he said, I place those too. So, what's his last name? He's the treasurer of Texas Society of CPAs. He has his own blog. I'll send y'all his bio. I was impressed. I talked to him on the phone Friday, and he said, I'll be more than happy to come. And the organization, the CPA organization, is going to send little goodies for the students. I don't know what they're sending. On the desktop, on these computers, if you ever get a chance, there's a Taking Care of Business video on there that came from the Texas Society of CPAs. It just tells you where you can get an accounting job. Every movie that's produced has about 6 CPAs attached to that movie. Because there's always money that's generated when that movie goes from the theater to Netflix to this DVD. There's always money that's generated. A friend of mine had her son in the movie Powder. Do you all remember that movie? Powder, he was struck by lightning. And every time they show that movie on TV, or somebody buys the DVD, or they watch it on Netflix, he gets a little check. And he just had a very small role. He was the boy in the bathroom with the very long hair, long curly hair. When I think the Powder collapsed in the restroom, or was maybe there was some bullying going on. I don't really remember. It's been a while since I've seen that. All right, so we're down to employees are rotated. All checks are authorized for payment. That's where Diane was not getting her authorization. Maybe she was authorizing it herself. And then the last one, reconcile those bank statements monthly. We don't get the checks anymore in the bank statement. That was a huge expense. One of my first jobs was counting checks to go in the bank statements. Boring. You could think of lots of other things while you were doing that job, but if it said there were 52 checks in there, I had to make sure there were 52 checks. We're going to talk about endorsing the checks, how you open up a checking account, the signature card. I'm still not on the signature card for the TBTEA account. I'm on the account, but I have to sign the signature card that the person that opened the account signed, and that was in Irving, Texas. So they have to wire that signature card here for me to sign. So that's the first thing, the signature card. You'll have to have ID, and you have to have that initial deposit. The deposit slips, I don't know, that's kind of going away. Now at home, we take a picture of the check. We've talked about the computer closet is one door down from here, and the wires were going over to that room some way, so that must be where he's drilling, but it sounds like he's right underneath us, right there. The deposit slip nowadays, we can take a picture of the check at home and make that deposit. If I make a deposit, I usually take it to the ATM and do it there, because I get charged if I go in and meet the teller face-to-face on my account. So I usually do it at the machine.
You get charged.
I do get charged. It's an old account. If I go face to face, yes. It was an account that was free if you only use the ATM. It is Bank of America. I've been with them since they were Bank of Gibraltar. I opened that account when I moved here in '88, and I've never changed. It's been Bank of Gibraltar, it's been San Antonio Savings, now it's Bank of America. I think it's been some other things. I don't know. But my checks, and I only write a few checks now, I was probably one of the last people to go to the debit card. I was still the check person at HEB. I started holding up the line writing my check. It was me. I don't know. I just couldn't get away from writing the check. I still carry my checkbook with me, which is crazy because we don't use our checks like we used to. But I always thought that was my receipt. I always had my checkbook. So now when we take the picture of them, I don't know what to do with that check. And we've talked about that. I don't know what to do with that check when I've made the deposit with the picture. Tom puts a little check mark on it, and I'm thinking, do I throw it away? Do I file it with my 25 years of paper boxes in the attic full of receipts? I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. So I guess I'm a paper hoarder, really. I don't know what to do with that check after I process it. What do y'all do with it?
Keep it.
You keep it. I keep it. So I don't know. It's hard for me to know what to do when we go to all of the digital things. And again, the debit card, usually it has the logo on it, the MasterCard or the Visa. You can really use your credit cards anywhere. American Express used to be the credit card that some places didn't take, or the Discover card. The American Express has a higher rate to process, so companies do lose a little bit of money with the American Express. But the MasterCard, Visa, and on there we could put the Discover card. With our debit card, when you use that debit card, it comes out immediately. I mean, it's out of your account before you can do it. That's going to sound real good on the video. I'm sorry for those that are listening to that. Oh gosh. But with using our credit cards, we always have the receipt. Some of your credit cards, things are guaranteed for 30 days. If something happens to it, I know it's that way with your American Express. But if you're traveling, and I have gone to see my son and his family in Ohio, and if I use my card and I have forgotten to tell them that I was going out of town, I'll have a phone call by the time I get to my car that there was a charge on my credit card in Ohio at this store at this time. Was that you? Good thing or bad thing? I don't know if my card had been stolen. It's a little embarrassing if they deny it. Yeah, but it's a good thing if someone had stolen your card. Yeah. So endorsing is just stamping or signing the back of your check. The payee has transferred, and that's who the check was made to, has just transferred it to another person. There are 3 different types of endorsements, and there are good pictures in the book. The blank endorsement, if the check is paid out to me, I would just sign my name to the back of it. The full endorsement, the entity signing the back of the check indicates the name of the entity to whom the check is to be paid. So if you're making that deposit at Bank of America, or if you're depositing a check that was made out to you or giving it to someone else, you might put that person's name on it. Then when they get ready to deposit it, they would have to sign it. The restricted is usually for a deposit for a company. It usually is a stamp, and may have the account number on it. Churches do that. They'll stamp those checks. That's another place, and I know you work with the church. You have to do the deposit at the church.
I don't.
Oh my gosh, I've helped my mother do that. That is a real pain, because you have envelopes with people's money in there. Sometimes it's cash, sometimes it's a check, sometimes it doesn't match up, and trying to get that deposit to come out.
Yeah, we have to have, our accountant does it, but he has to have somebody else double count it.
Yes, verify it. Oh, yes.
And then they have to initial that.
That they did it, and the envelopes, you need to keep the envelopes to make sure that that person gets credit, because it's not always just their name, it's their church number. So, yeah, there's a lot with just making a deposit. Oh, there are the pictures in here. There's the blank endorsement. There's the full endorsement. And there's the restricted. So Becca would have a stamp for that restricted one. When we're making a deposit, and our deposits will come from sales, but it also could come from our accounts receivable. Here we're just reporting the cash sales, debit to cash, credit to sales, and it could be different kinds of sales. If you were a cosmetic company, you could have lipstick sales, you could have eyeshadow sales. If it's Dillard's, you could have the shoe department where we're going to get our extra bonus check. It could be the jewelry, the whatever, the men's department, the ladies department, purses. I think jewelry and purses are in the same department at Dillard's. Proceeds of collections of a company for accounts receivable, debit to cash again, and cash is the easy one. If we're making a deposit, that's a debit to cash. If we're writing a check, that's a credit to cash if we're writing a check. So cash, accounts receivable. Just a little bit more information on the credit cards. And the last comment down there is that the merchants usually do have to pay a fee. American Express is the highest one. And I think that's why a lot of places don't take American Express. Other sources of revenue, debit cards are issued by banks, savings and loans institutions, credit unions. It's not an extension of your credit, it's just what you have in that checking account as your debit card. It can be tied to a credit card, so if you have an overdraft, it can directly come off of a credit card. So we can do that. So that third one where it says the holder cannot spend more than the balance in that account, they can, if it's tied to a credit card with that bottom one. The checkbook, when the checking account is first open, you're issued checks. Usually they start with like a 1001. The reason I don't ever close my account, I think mine are in the 10,000 already. That's how many checks. I don't want to start with that low number. If you're writing a check and you have a low number, or you're taking a deposit or taking a check from someone, what does the low number tell you? It's a new account. And that's the worst accounts for fraud, for check hiding, for overdrafts, is a brand new account. So that's one of the reasons I haven't changed mine, unless it's just too much trouble to sign the signature card. There's a good picture in the book on the different parts of a check. The check written order signed by the drawer, that's the person whose account it is, and they've signed their name at the bottom. What page is that? 227. I think there's one on our slide too. Instructing the drawee to pay a specific sum of money to the payee. Here's an example of a check. This one is not very realistic, and this one looks like a company check with the check stub over here on the left. This one is not realistic because of this number right here. And this number, because it's still attached to the check stub, it's still in the checkbook, is this number up here. So it has been coded already with the amount of the check, and we haven't processed that check. So that's the only unrealistic thing about the picture of that check. A lot of companies don't use that check stub anymore, but if you're writing checks by hand, and that organization that I'm in, we order checks that have the stub on the left like that. And it's a huge book. It usually has 3 on a page, 3 checks. But if you're using a computer, if you're using Peachtree, it will generate the checks for you. So it makes it a little bit easier to pay those bills. And you can see the check is signed by Becca Baker. Her account name is up in the left-hand corner. The routing number for the bank is up there, the 1621112. This is the identification of the bank right there. This is her account number right here. This is usually a processing number, a routing number. The 15 is the number of the check up there, and then the amount. That's the only thing that's not realistic about the picture of that check. And I think I've told you, the first bank that I worked in, we filed checks and subtracted them from their accounts based on their signature. We didn't have account numbers. We didn't even have routing numbers back then. I'm really telling my age. So things have changed drastically with writing a check. And a lot of places will take your check, process it, and then they give you the check back. So they don't need your check once they've taken it out of your account immediately. Why can't they give you credit immediately when you make a deposit? I don't know. Because they can certainly take it out of your account, but if you deposit a large check, there's a 10-day hold on it. That part doesn't make any sense to me, that they can't give you immediate credit. Why can't they put the hold on the account at that other bank? Sometimes they'll give you partial, and then the rest is uncollected until the check actually clears. Yeah. If there's amount that doesn't match with the figures and what's written, and I probably should have showed you that. Let's go back. This check was for $580. Notice that we don't have an "and" in there until where the decimal point was. We don't write checks as often as we used to, but in business you probably will. The first time I bought a car and I had to write a check out of my checking account because they put the loan money in my checking account and I wrote the check, I didn't know how to write the check. It was a huge amount and it didn't fit on the line. So, you know, you kind of have to get used to how much is going to fit on there. So this one was for $580, and it was 00100s or XX100s, $580, and 00100s or XX100s. And there was only one "and." It's not $580 and 0,100s. And do you really need to write the word dollars? Because the dollars is over there to the right. But make sure you fill up that whole line. And you can just use, if you're using it on the computer, just fill up the line with the dashes or the hyphens so that somebody can't write something in there. And be careful about pay to the order of, because you can change that on a check. If it doesn't match the figure and the written part, the bank usually takes the written part because it took you a little bit longer to think that one through. And then they'll usually write the number up there, and if you're right there, they'll have you initial it so that that's the number that they're using. That's where banks can make a mistake too as they're processing those checks. In business, we're going to keep up with everything. We're going to keep a copy of our bank reconciliation. We're going to keep copies of our bank deposits. Here's our total deposits. And this looks like we just have checks. This was the deposit on the 1st, the 4th, the 16th, the 27th, and the 28th. Usually it would be more than just one check. So we're keeping a track of the checks that we've written, the bank deposits that we've made, just like we would in the journal. Here's our deposits, there's the withdrawal and the fees, and then the balance in our account. Now when you get your bank statement, the bank statement doesn't usually have the same number that you have in your checking account, in that account that says cash. So we'll have to make some adjustments. If we have written a check that the bank hasn't processed yet, that is an outstanding check. That was one of your terms, outstanding check. And then a deposit in transit is a deposit that we have made. We've recorded it in our checkbook, but maybe it's still in the night deposit. Maybe it's still underneath someone's front seat of their car because they forgot to make that deposit. So it's a deposit in transit. It's one that we've recorded, but it hasn't made its way to the bank yet to be processed. The bank, if they have any fees, they'll take that out immediately when they do the bank statement. Here's just a picture of what the bank statement looks like. We had an ATM charge. We had a service charge of $5. Our deposits are listed. On some statements, it will show the check number because that check number is also on that check down at the bottom in that magnetic code. So it can tell you the check number. So we have $3,592 left in that account according to the bank, but it might not be what we have in our checkbook. So we want to make those two match. We're going to calculate the deposits in transit and the outstanding checks, and we're going to process those service charge and fees. The first one under the steps, those are things that the bank doesn't have yet that are already in our account. And the second one, recognize the service charge and fees, that's what the bank has already processed, but we probably don't have that in our checkbook. We need to record it in the checkbook, and then we also need to record it in a journal entry. There's the number that we showed on our bank statement, that $3,592. We made a deposit that wasn't showing for $900. And then we had some outstanding checks, just that one, number 15, for $580. And it says adjusted balance. This should agree with your checkbook, $3,912. And we'll do a couple of those on Thursday. NSF check, non-sufficient funds. We've written a check and we didn't have the money there. If a check that we've deposited has NSF, usually we're charged. Sometimes it's $25, sometimes it's a little more. A debit memorandum, and the next two things, you'll see those on the test. A debit memorandum is a deduction from the account holder's balance, and a credit memorandum is an increase in the account holder's balance. Okay, so a debit and a credit memo. And we can look at these steps as we go through the practice one that we'll do on Thursday. They don't all have to be done in that same order, but we could use that as a check sheet. The EFT, electronic funds transfer, my check is deposited automatically. There's not an actual check. I don't even get a pay stub unless I go into my account here at Alamo and look it up and print it off. So there's no paperwork at all that goes with our check. ATM, the automatic teller machine, and you'll see those on the bank statement. Here's some just advantages for using online banking. And I think it's just changed a little bit with our deposits. You know, it's so easy to make that deposit now. Disadvantages, what do you do with the check? What do you do with all that paperwork? But it's usually, it usually happens quickly whenever you're doing the online banking. The bottom one is the one that concerns me, just trust. I think that's why I'm so afraid to throw those checks away, or to shred them. And we've all seen some fraudulent things occur. think some of these tips are just common sense. And we'll stop here. We'll do the petty cash on Thursday, and we'll reconcile a bank statement. Okay? Anybody have just specific questions?
Okay.
Okay. Did I say 6A1? Let me make sure what demo problem I'm using. I'm going to do the 6B1 in class, so the 6A1 is correct. Okay? So in your homework, you are doing an A. That was a good point, though, because I usually do the B in the spring. So we are doing 1A, and it's 6A1. So that is correct, because we're doing the B1 as the demo in class. Any other questions? All right, and they quit making all that noise at the end of class. Just leave your name tents up, or you can turn it off. Leave your name